What is going on, everybody? So I am back today to talk about a film that was released this year that I wanted to see in the theater, but I did not get a chance to see it in the theater, so I just watched it when it became available, video on demand. And I was actually looking forward to seeing this movie because of initial reactions, and I'm looking forward to talking about it today. And the film I'm going to be discussing is Dungeons and Dragons Honor Among Thieves. Dungeons and Dragons Honor Among Thieves is directed by John Francis Daley and Jonathan M. Goldstein. A charming thief and a band of unlikely adventurers undertake an epic heist to retrieve a lost relic, but things go dangerously awry when they run afoul of the wrong people. So when I saw the trailer for this movie, didn't really know what to expect, because a lot of times when you're basing a film off of source material that already exists, whether that be a game or a book or any type of thing that you try to base an entire film off of, it's worrisome, especially something like Dungeons and Dragons, which I have virtually no familiarity with whatsoever, other than my youngest brother Sam is a huge fan of Dungeons and Dragons. He plays all the time. He writes these immersive campaigns that he loves being involved in, and it's something that he's very passionate about. And I was lucky enough, I actually watched this movie with him, and that actually gave me a little bit more insight into the film and the community of people who really love Dungeons and Dragons and what it represents with this gaming community, people coming together and really getting immersed in something that's not, just something on a screen anymore, which, video games are great. Immersive online gaming is great for people who enjoy that, but using your imagination and creating these really immersive worlds is something that a lot of people really love and enjoy. So it was really cool getting his perspective from that as well, and I'll talk a little bit about that when I get into reviewing. So this is a really baseline premise adventure story where we're introduced to Chris Pine's character and Michelle Rodriguez's character. We're shown they're in prison. He starts to, make his plea as to why he shouldn't be in prison, why the two of them shouldn't be in prison anymore. We get the backstory as to what brought them there. They get out of prison, and then this certain set of circumstances comes together. An old friend, played by Hugh Grant, double crosses them. They have to try to get back at him so that Chris Pine can get his daughter back, and so they get this big old band of heroes together, or misfit outcasts that become heroes together in order to achieve this task. And so throughout the film, similar to a lot of people's Dungeons and Dragons campaigns, you have these little side quests that they're going on to in order to get to the big quest, the big final showdown. And it was really entertaining. I really liked this movie a lot. I thought it was a lot of fun. It didn't take itself way too seriously. There was a lot of wink and nods at the camera. And the other thing that I really appreciated about this movie, as I said, my younger brother is really into Dungeons and Dragons. And throughout the entire film, he was calling out certain creatures that showed up, different places that they went to. And so you can tell that the filmmakers who created this project are truly passionate about Dungeons and Dragons. They actually give a shit about the source material. They wanted people who have played the game before to really enjoy it. And my brother said, even though he doesn't always play in those worlds, that there's a lot of the framework and the characters that were created that are still used. And so a lot of people, really care about that stuff. And so to make sure that that was included, it's great that the filmmakers actually care and pay attention to the things that people want in their movies, because I know the 2000s Dungeons and Dragons films and the couple of sequels that spawned off of them were really hated. People thought they were absolutely terrible. And this one does a great job of being accessible for people who don't know anything about Dungeons and Dragons whatsoever. And there's definitely a charm to it. I think all of the characters in it are interesting, with the exception of Chris Pine's character, who honestly, being the lead of the film, was the one I cared about the least. They give you the backstory of him and his wife. His wife dies. He gets arrested, so he's away from his daughter for 2 years, and they try to create that tension. But aside from that, he doesn't really have any heroic moments. He doesn't really have anything with his character arc that makes him all that interesting. And so all the other side characters are far more fascinating than he is, which is weird. Typically when you watch this movie, they'd play a lot more into the lead character being the one you get behind the most. And so I thought that was interesting that his character was the one I cared about the least. This is a little over 2 hours. I didn't feel like it was super bloated. There were definitely things I think that could have been reworked to make the runtime feel a little bit smoother, because there was a couple moments where I was just like, okay, this feels like it's being padded on a little bit. I did like the action sequences in this. I thought there were a lot of really comical moments that I was surprised how many times this movie made me laugh. There were also a couple of moments where they tried a little hard, where the humor didn't necessarily land. Some of the CGI effects were really incredible. Some of the CGI effects looked a little on the cheaper side. It just depends on where you look, and obviously this is a little rough around the edges. It's not a perfect movie by any means, but it is an incredibly enjoyable movie that you can just sit down and be immersed in this like adventure world, which I don't think there's a lot of movies out there that I can think of in the past few years, because I think of like the big ones in the time frame of like the Lord of the Rings trilogy, where like everyone was trying to be Lord of the Rings in the early 2000s, and everyone wanted to try to make something like that. And it's impossible to make something like that, but it isn't impossible to create a fantasy film that is, you know, bigger budget, that is audience friendly, that keeps people entertained, that has likable characters. And I think that's where this movie stands apart from a lot of the really bad adventure films, is that the characters actually have time and thought put into them. And despite them not being necessarily fully fleshed out, they're fleshed out enough to where you can have a fun time being in this world with these characters for a 2-hour runtime. So have you seen Dungeons & Dragons Honor Among Thieves? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Leave me a comment down below and let me know what you thought. I thought this was a really fun movie, and despite it not being perfect, it was still really entertaining, and I'm very glad that I watched it. As always, if you like the video and subscribe to the channel, it helps me out a lot and lets me know the type of content you're looking for. I'm always putting out new material and look forward to getting more out for you in the near future. And as always, everyone, thank you so much for watching, and have a great rest of your day.